Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. And welcome to CBBC's Digital China webinar hosted today with Intralink. Today we are looking at open innovation in East Asia, opportunities for UK collaboration. My name is Chris Lethbridge, China Market Business Advisor for the Southeast of England with CBBC. To quickly introduce CBBC, the China-Britain Business Council helps British and Chinese businesses and organisations work together in China, the UK and third markets around the world. With 65 years of experience and experts in 11 UK offices and 15 Chinese locations, we support companies of all sizes and sectors, whether they are new entrants or established operations, to realise the full potential of the fastest growing market in the world. Our network of staff understands the sectorial, geographical, and cultural aspects of doing business in China, and this personal expertise is complemented by a range of CBBC events, research, and consultative services tailored to meet the specific requirements of companies. We cooperate closely with the Department of International Trade, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and across government to highlight export opportunities for UK companies and investment opportunities for Chinese organisations. As an independent organisation, CBBC offers trusted, impartial advice while maintaining close partnerships with the UK and Chinese governments. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Gregory Sutch, CEO of Intralink based here in the UK, as well as Emma Hu, Project Manager at Intralink based in Shanghai. The team from Intralink will be talking about open innovation in East Asia and the opportunities for UK collaboration. Intralink are an international business development consultancy with a deep specialisation in East Asia. And Intralink enable Western companies to expand in Asia and Asian companies to collaborate with global innovators. Intralink have 80 employees and offices in China, Japan, South Korea, the US, and across Europe. Greg and Emma will be speaking for about 40 minutes today, following which we'll have a Q&A session at the end. If anyone has any questions, please submit these through the Q&A box on your screen. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Greg.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Do you want to just give me the thumbs up so I know you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
You can hear me fine. Okay, right, let me just share this with you. Oh, sorry. There we go. How's that? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're in Asia. And thank you, Chris, for that introduction. To some extent, you've slightly stolen my thunder because I was going to say a few words about Intralink, which I will do. But first of all, as Chris said, I'm going to present on the subject of open innovation in East Asia. It's not just China, it's broader than that. So it's China, but it's also Japan and South Korea, and more specifically, the opportunities for UK collaboration. So what that means is opportunities for UK startups or scale-ups, for example, to collaborate with East Asian, and in this particular case, more so Chinese.
Sorry, Greg, to interrupt. We can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't see my slides. I beg your pardon. Let me try again. Okay.
Right now, it's looking at the Zoom screen.
Is it? Okay. You can't see it now?
No, not yet.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Sorry about this. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where to go, Chris. I've got share screen, but it's not wanting to share the screen.
Okay.
Do you want me to try to share over here, and then you can just tell me when you want to switch the slides?
Yep, let's do that.
1 second. Let me try one. Hang on, I might have it now. Hang on 1 second. Okay, I think I've got it now.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, is that on full screen?
It's a white screen for me.
The white screen.
You have got full screen.
We've got
No,
a full white screen.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Okay.
no, Greg, it's a white screen.
Oh, it's a white screen. Okay, I'll stop sharing. I'll try again. Okay, have you got it now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
do. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Sorry, apologies, folks, for the technical problems there. So the subject is on the opportunities for UK collaboration, and what that means is opportunities for UK startups to collaborate with Chinese corporates on the one hand, and then on the other hand, the opportunity for UK corporates to collaborate with the Chinese innovation ecosystem, which really means with Chinese startups. So I'm going to present the first half of the presentation. So I've done it in, so it's divided into two parts. I'm going to speak on the subject of context and trends, just to give you some context and trends. And my part is targeted more at UK startups that are interested in the opportunities to collaborate with Chinese corporates that are coming in this direction, the direction of the UK, to find interesting companies to work with. Emma is going to present the second part, which is on the Chinese innovation ecosystem. Probably for many of you on this call, the more interesting part, and that's really about the opportunity for UK corporates to collaborate with the Chinese innovation ecosystem, so startups within that ecosystem. So without further ado, let me just give you a little bit of background on who I am and on who the business, what the business is. My name is Greg Sutch. I'm the Chief Executive of Intralink. I'm based in the UK, but my background is Asia, and it's more Japan than it is China, insofar as I was in Japan from the early 90s through till the mid noughties, till about 2005. But in the late 90s, it became obvious to me that China was becoming more important. And so I started to travel to China and open an office in Shanghai in 2001, and then moved across to China permanently myself in 2005. And I was in China for 3 or 4 years before returning to the UK in 2009. So I've been back in the UK for 11 years now. As Chris kindly said, we're an international business development and innovation consultancy specializing in East Asia. We've been around for about 30 years. Based in Oxford. We're actually up to 85 employees now across Asia, Europe, and the US. We've worked for hundreds, actually more than 1,000 organizations. That includes corporate startups, SMEs, and government agencies. And our focus is on what I call enabling technology. So the tech that makes things work, the tech that sits inside your smartphone or inside your PC. And we look at enabling technologies across a whole swathe of sectors, but the key ones for us at the moment are energy, mobility, IT, and healthcare. And then on the right-hand side of the sort of 3 key things that we do, I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a second, but it's essentially Asia market entry, open innovation, which we're going to talk about today, and trade and investment. That's our footprint. Very simply, as you can see from that, the majority of people are in Asia, which is Tokyo, Shanghai, and Seoul principally, with smaller offices in Taipei and Sydney. And this is what we do. So we essentially carve it up into 3 parts. So on the one hand, we're working with mostly startups, so venture-backed tech startups, tech scale-ups, and to some extent small and medium enterprises to grow their businesses in Asia. We're also working with corporates to connect them with the ideas to transform their businesses. And as many of you will know, digital transformation is something that has really come to the fore, particularly since the onset of the pandemic this year. And so that has become a priority, or more of a priority, let's say, for many corporates around the world. And finally, we're working with EDOs. EDOs are economic development organizations to help them promote their exports in Asia and also attract investment from Asia. Before I move on to the next slide, I'll just explain that the open innovation really came out of the work that we've been doing for tech startups and scale-ups for many, many years, taking UK technologies, but also European and US technologies into China, into Japan, into Korea. And it was probably 5 or 6 years ago that Japanese corporates in particular started to come to us and say, well, listen, over the years, you've brought us many interesting technologies from the UK, but what we're actually looking for is this. And that, of course, is what you call open innovation. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But that, in a sense, was where our open innovation business started, and it did start in Japan. And just final slide on Intralink. There's just a selection of companies and organizations that we are working for or that we have worked for. Many on the left you won't know because they are smaller businesses, startups and SMEs. The corporates in the middle are actually, without exception, Japanese companies, and then government organizations on the right-hand side. So onto the subject of open innovation. Now, I wasn't quite sure where to pitch this because I suspect some of you on the call are past masters and very familiar with the concept, but for others on the call, perhaps it's something new. So I just thought I'd start with a very simple definition, and there will be people on the call who perhaps would define it in a different way. But for me, the easiest way to define open innovation is to say what it's not, which is it's not closed innovation. In a sense, it's the opposite of closed innovation. Closed innovation is what typically its corporates do through their internal efforts, so through in-house R&D, for example. By contrast, open innovation is opening up the innovation process and innovating through collaboration with external parties, with third parties. And in the case of corporates, that's normally collaboration with startups or scale-ups or universities or incubators or research institutes and those sorts of organizations. And I think what is fascinating, certainly from my perspective, is the growth in open innovation over, let's say, the last 5 years or so. And I'm looking at it mostly from Japan, but I think this is something that is beginning in China, particularly domestically. It's now very much become a global phenomenon from a Japanese perspective, but in China, perhaps still quite domestic. And the question then is, what is driving open innovation in particular, but perhaps innovation more generally? And I think the first thing is just the ever-increasing disruption by startups. And that just starts, frankly, with the sheer number of startups, the explosion in startups across the world, which is being driven by venture capital. So that's the first thing. The second I would say is, again, looking at it from perhaps from a Western corporate perspective or a Japanese corporate perspective for that matter, the growth in competition from other corporates, particularly out of China. Large corporates in China that didn't exist 10 years ago, or certainly weren't large 10 years ago, and are now very serious players on the global stage. So that is another important driver. The third one I've listed here, I've described as socio-economic factors. I've listed two here: shrinking and aging populations and the shortage of talent. Certainly very serious problems in Japan, but I would say increasingly in China and Korea, and actually in Western economies as well. A shrinking population obviously means there are fewer people to do the jobs, to run the factories, to plow the fields, and therefore there is there is much greater emphasis on automation and on things like robotics. And equally, aging populations means that there are more people to take care of, but fewer people to take care of them. So again, innovation is needed to find ways to essentially replace those people that are no longer available to take care of older folk. And finally, shortage of talent. It'll be interesting perhaps I imagine there are quite a number of corporates on the call, but my sense that it's increasingly difficult for corporates in particular to attract talent. Young talent has more in the way of options now, and I think increasingly is going in the direction of startups. And therefore, one way for corporates to engage talent, if they can't bring it in-house, is to collaborate with it. And that means collaborating with startups, where in many instances the talent resides. And the final one is the new normal. Awful term, I know, but that obviously has accelerated or has come into existence in the last 6 months or so, remote learning, remote working, and remote shopping, and so on. And that is driving digital transformation in particular, but innovation more generally. So my final point at the bottom here is open innovation is about embracing disruption as opposed to pushing it away and recognizing the mutual benefits of external collaboration. And that is certainly the direction in which Japanese corporates have gone in the last 5 years or so. That was not the case 10 years ago, where it was very much about not invented here and innovating internally. And I think that is the direction in which it will go in China. Apologies, the little picture on the right-hand side is in Japanese, but it just explains who the sort of key players are in the innovation ecosystem. So you've got corporates, you've got venture capital, you've got incubators, accelerators, startups, universities, and of course government is also heavily involved in the innovation ecosystem through grants and so on. Next slide is on the subject of open innovation strategies, and I've divided this into 2 parts, short-term and medium to long-term. And again, this is, I suppose I'd describe this as anecdotal. This is what we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. It's not the result of some sort of deep market analysis, but short-term is often driven by an urgent need resulting from an exceptional occurrence. So for example, a new kid on the block. So that might be a disruptive competitor, a highly disruptive competitor, which means that a corporate needs to move very quickly to protect its existing business. Or another example, of course, is the coronavirus pandemic, which again is driving in particular digital transformation. So that is the move from, again, I think the picture on the right is self-explanatory, but the move away from a traditional analog way of doing things to doing things digitally. And many of the clients, the corporates that we're working with, are undertaking digital transformation. I think it's particularly true of large organizations that traditionally have sold through large sales forces. One example would be life insurance, for example, particularly in Japan, which was really a door-to-door or a desk-to-desk type sale. That obviously is no longer possible. So you need to find digital ways to engage your customers and your prospective customers. And I think it's best addressed through what I've described here is direct bilateral engagement with startups, or let's say scale-ups, but these need to be later stage, fairly mature scale-ups that have technologies and solutions which corporates can bring to market quite quickly. You know, when you need to move quickly, then in my view, that is probably the best approach, and that is certainly what we are saying with the Japanese corporates. The second half, or the second part, is medium to long term, so that's working with incubators and accelerators, and it's also making strategic investments direct or via venture funds. Many of you will also know that in the last 10 years or so, increasing numbers of corporates have set up internal venture funds, so-called CVCs, corporate venture capital funds, and are investing in startups from those, or in some cases, they're doing off-balance sheet investments directly into startups. So my sense is the current trend is toward short-term survival, perhaps a little strong, but in some cases, it is a question of survival, short-term survival strategies, and away from the longer-term plays such as accelerators and pitch contests, which were very much in vogue, let's say a year ago even, but certainly 3 or 4 years ago. CVCs, lots of CVCs out there, a lot of them still with significant amounts of dry capital and looking to invest therefore in startups for the medium to longer term. So why are Asian corporates interested in Europe? On the one hand, the next slide is more specifically on the UK, but certainly we're seeing a lot of interest from Asian corporates, as I said, particularly Japanese, but this is also now true, increasingly true of Korean, and I think shortly of Chinese ones. I think the first actually is perhaps the chart on the top right-hand corner, overrepresentation in Silicon Valley. There is huge competition amongst the corporates in Silicon Valley to collaborate with the best startups. There are massive accelerators like some of you will have heard of Plug and Play, which has hundreds and hundreds of corporate members. And frankly, the valuations are crazy. And I think there is increasing recognition that it's not all about Silicon Valley, that there are interesting technologies, innovation clusters outside of Silicon Valley, that means within the US, but it also means within Europe. So if you look on the left-hand side there, this is just a summary. The list could go on and on, but there are many, many tech clusters across Europe, and you can see there London listed about halfway down, particularly strong in the areas of fintech, edtech, adtech, and blockchain, and frankly, much more. And finally, the growth in the number of European unicorns, which is a demonstration of the success of the innovation ecosystem in Europe. And I think that also is attracting the attention of Asian corporates and is creating opportunities for European and UK startups. So penultimate slide, why UK? Well, pretty much whatever metric you look at, the UK is pretty much leading in Europe. So on the top left-hand corner, venture capital invested, the UK is double, almost double what Germany, which comes in at second, has invested in the period 2015 to 29, so miles ahead of number two. And that then translates naturally into the number of companies that funded. So again, same period of time, 2015 to 2019. This is specifically London, so UK would be a bigger number, but 2,700 companies received VC funding in that period. And again, that is more than double Paris, which comes in at number two. Bottom left-hand corner, that again translates into the number of tech unicorns. UK leads by some distance. And then finally, I think this also is important for Asian corporates that are looking at the UK, and that is the UK's capabilities when it comes to things like software development. And the UK it's on a par really with Germany, but very significant numbers of software developers, and I think that's of interest to many corporates. So final slide from me, and again I would just stress that this to me illustrates the opportunity that there is for UK startups to collaborate with Asian corporates. Most of our experience to date is Japanese, but I think that will move across to China in the coming years. Here are 4 examples which are all live, and frankly, if there is any interest in any of these, and you're a startup and you think that you could tick a box or 2 for these corporates, then by all means contact me afterwards. I've tried to pick a sort of selection of sectors here. So the first one is home consumer. So this is a company that is trying to address the challenge of introducing advanced tech into domestic washrooms to create value, to create new value. That's all about being competitive. Areas of interest are clean tech, energy efficiency, connectivity, even digital healthcare. Can your lavatory tell you something about the state of your health? And some interesting ideas around that. I touched on the subject of life insurance, actually. This particular company's challenge is to develop new engagement models for the younger digital native, let's say, the digital customer base, and their areas of interest are insurtech, digital healthcare, and AI. There's another client working in the advanced materials space. They're looking to develop sustainable next generation materials, interested in biodegradable polymers, recyclable materials. And then finally, manufacturing. And again, this is being driven by a need to automate, in view of the fact that there are fewer people that are able to do these jobs or are willing to do these jobs, and all the various technologies that are required to move to, for example, a fully automated smart factory, IoT sensing, even predictive maintenance. So that is just a little bit of background, just to kind of give you a sense of well, first of all, what open innovation is and the direction in which it's headed, particularly from an Asian, Japanese Asian perspective, and the opportunity that it's creating for UK startups. So I'd now like to hand over to my colleague Emma, who's going to talk more specifically about innovation in China. Emma, can I hand over to you?
Yep. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll start the video for a short bit and close it off just for connectivity. So just a bit about myself. I was born in Taiwan and then I moved to Vancouver, Canada when I was 10. My background is actually in biochemistry, but I worked in China for the past 10 years. I started doing a lot of market research, so deeper understanding of the consumers here. Did a bit of strategy consulting, and then I had my own startup for about 3 years in Shanghai. And so now I'm with Intralink doing business development consulting. My coverage is quite wide, so TMT, ICT to healthcare, new energy and automotive. Okay, so the focus of today from my side, one is around the technology. So we'll start with how coronavirus accelerated the implementation and the learning curve. So first, to start off, healthcare, I think everybody should be quite familiar, the use of robots to decrease human-to-human contact. And then below, this is a scanning robot to test for people's temperature and to check that they are wearing masks. These robots and these technologies have actually been around before, it's just they were not implemented widely. So this robot obviously increased the efficiency. It can scan 3-meter range up to 5 to 10 people per second. Next is logistics. So also to decrease human-to-human contact, you can see in this video, there's no driver in this truck. It's actually a remote person that is driving from far away. And this is the truck itself, so you can just load the goods in. This is also in a similar vein from SF Express. They use drones to deliver up to 3.3 kilograms of goods. So they had basically special passes during the coronavirus to, I guess, quickly forego the policies that usually would have barred them from using this tech. Next, government. So you might have known China built a few hospitals very quickly, and they actually live streamed the process for 93 million live audience, and it was 24 hours. China government, as you might know, traditionally is not very open about sharing. So this was a new thing that they tried to get people to participate. And so they socialized the whole process. They allowed people to log in, watch, and then cheer them on. So on the right side, you can cheer on, for example, the yellow truck or the forklift. And this helped to incentivize the workers through this whole process. Next, I think work. This is Ding Ding, and then this is Tencent, similar to Zoom. I think everybody is familiar with these platforms. And then similarly, they are also being used in education. So in this video, you'll see it's adopted for school. So instead of the teacher picking the student to answer the question, this automatically chooses the student to answer. And then these platforms, you might notice the rating is quite low. And I would say the other difference, or what happened to the children here, was that because they are digital natives, they understood that if they gave them low ratings, they could actually not go to school. So they all banded together to give them poor ratings. And then the government too also use these platforms. So this is the Wuhan Deputy Chief of Statistics, and he was hosting live sessions with small medium enterprise owners to go through the questions and just make sure that they understood the most updated information for their business. So again, these technologies have been around before, but it's just implementing them in new areas or implementing them in more use cases. And next, we'll discuss briefly how China's ecosystem is special, the factors that make it quite different from other places. So first, I think a lot of people know China was relatively isolated from technology until 1978. So you can see on the graph on the top left, this is the number of internet users. China is the red line and US is the yellow line. So it quickly overtook the US in about 2007. So the effect of this is what I call leapfrogging. It's very fast adoption, and they don't have for example, they didn't start on email, so most people start on mobile phones instead of PCs, on WeChat instead of emails. So you'll see here are some comparisons. For example, Amazon to Taobao. It took Amazon about 14 years to reach 50% user penetration versus Taobao took about 9 years. Similarly for other ones, WhatsApp versus WeChat down here, Uber versus Didi. There is a much faster adoption in China because of the relative vacuum. Next, as most people know, there's one-party government in China. This means there's no data privacy dilemma. I know that a lot of people are very sensitive about this, but in China, it's not really a discussion. So the benefit of this, I think, is there's a high level of clean data. So here you'll see this is the user ID of a person in China. When you register your WeChat account, it's actually linked to your ID, also to your Alipay, also when you buy a train ticket. So the government actually knows who you are talking to, where you're going, what you're buying. So it's a very clean database around a unified ID. Next, as you know, China has a very large population, and with this comes very large data volume. So the data processing efficiency in China is very, very strong. In the public streets camera alone, there's about 20 million. So if you can imagine the amount of live video feed that's coming through, and they have to process the people that are passing through these videos, either through gait, facial, or voice recognition to identify the people. Last, the one-child policy, I think, is also unique to China. But with this, as you can imagine, when the child grows up, he or she will have to support the 6 elderly people. On top of this, the 2-tier pension plan was really only set up in 1997. So right now, the estimates for the pension fund is that it will run dry around 2035. So to combat this, Chinese government has been pushing more cost-effective and decentralized healthcare. So this, for example, is WeDoctor. It's an online platform. It has an online hospital license from the government. So you can connect a lot of your devices, feed your biometrics, for example, to the doctors. Next, we'll talk about some of the investment trends that has happened. I think it's not a surprise that China, among the Asian region, takes up a large volume and also value. Recently, there are several cases where the unicorns or the startups didn't work out, and so there's been an adjustment. So on the bottom left, this is a case called OFO Shared Bikes. It was a unicorn founded in 2014, had 63 million monthly active users, was valued at $2 billion US, but it went bankrupt. So it didn't have a clear path to profitability. There was no clear business model. The acquisition failed. And so it still owes a lot of people money. So the effect of this, there were several cases similar to this. There was also a trend of peer-to-peer lending, a lot of scandal. So here, this is the large venture deal volume between 2014 to 2019. You can see here, the red line is China, the blue line is US, and the yellow line is the rest of the world. So you can see a decline here that I've circled. But if we look deeper, if we look at just this period between comparing 2018 to 2014 to 17, you can see the deal volume has actually gone up versus the deal value has dropped. So I think that it's just a market correction. So if you know what you're looking for, I think this is a good time to look for either acquisitions or some sort of a deal. Next, in terms of the investment verticals, on the left side, this is a survey of 2019, the most watched sectors. So it's not surprising, AI, healthcare, big data. And then on the right, we compared the actual investment value. So what they say they're interested versus what they actually invested in the past. So you can see there are gaps. Some of them move up, some of them move down. For example, education was quite high in the middle, but it dropped all the way down here. So the takeaway, I think, is one, there might not be enough mature, good startups in the space that they're interested in, but also maybe the ROI or the business model just doesn't make sense for an investment firm to get into. For example, fintech, obviously the ROI would be better and more interesting to a VC. So next we'll dive deep into the geographical differences. You can see here the map of China. On the right side, we listed the top cities in terms of unicorn count. So I think not surprising, Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou is where Alibaba is. Shenzhen is where Tencent is. Nanjing, Guangzhou, Suzhou, Tianjin. And then next we compared it to the GII ranking, so Global Innovation Index. The top few are quite similar: Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Nanjing, Hangzhou. And the new ones that I would recommend that you look at is Wuhan, Taipei, Xi'an, and Chengdu. So these are some of the emerging, I would say, hotspots that you can look at for new tech or innovation. Next, we dive into each of the top ranked cities. So Beijing, as you might know, is home to the central government. So a lot of technology that requires a lot of oversight, for example, fintech, entertainment and media, healthcare, big data, surveillance tech, will be based there. So for example, ByteDance, Baidu, SenseTime, the AI engine are all based in Beijing. Shanghai, we call it the international hub of China. So it has the highest number of headquarters of international companies. So the trend that I see is that a lot of tech that requires a good connection to the international, the leading tech, for example, in medtech, advertising, clean energy, lifestyle even, I would say would be based in Shanghai, or you would find a lot more interesting tech there. Next, Hangzhou, Alibaba, as I mentioned, is based there. So the trend there is they remove the barriers to e-commerce. So a lot of startups or businesses around there will be close to Alibaba's ecosystem. So within their ecosystem, you have Taobao, B2C platform, Alipay, the payment platform, Sesame Credit, Hema, which is a grocery delivery platform, Ele.me, the food delivery platform, so restaurant food delivery. So you can see that all of them are e-commerce based, and then supporting these platforms are the foundation and the infrastructure. So Ali Cloud, Ant Financial, and Cainiao, which is a logistics company. These are all within the Alibaba ecosystem, and they all focus on removing barriers for e-commerce. Next, Shenzhen, as I mentioned, Tencent is there. So this is where you'll find WeChat, WeChat's team, and also they have collaboration with WeDoctor. Tencent Games is very strong. But also Shenzhen is known as the hardware hub. So a lot of electronics, robotics, wearables will be there, but also Tencent, where they're strong is gaming, social networks. Will also, you'll see a lot of innovation there. The next few cities are smaller cities, so Nanjing, Guangzhou, and Suzhou. Nanjing, I would say, is a service industry hub, so they have lower cost labor, but quite well trained. Guangzhou is known for export, so it's a port city, a lot of manufacturing, chemicals, cosmetics, automotive. Suzhou is very close to Shanghai, as you can see here, so we call it the parking lot of Shanghai. It has a lot of industrial parks, manufacturing, textiles, pharma. A lot of them will move there if you don't want it in Shanghai. So this slide is dissecting the adoption curve. So just some examples. On the left side, you can see the technology adoption curve. On the right side is laggard. So here I have digital wallets. And what I mean by this is most people in China are using digital wallets and mobile payments. So I would say only laggards, very late laggards, are not using mobile payments in China. B is late majority. So I would say influencer advertising and influencer commerce is very big in China. So here you'll see this guy is competing against Jack Ma to sell lipstick. So they're live streaming. He sold 15,000 lipsticks live streaming within 5 minutes and broke the World Guinness record. So you can see, you might be familiar, they would test whatever product. It could be clothes, it could be a home appliance, they could test it. It could be lipstick, as he was trying it here. And as he's live streaming, the audience can give comments or questions. It's almost like shopping in person, and the shop clerk would help you. And then after he explains it, then you can put in your order. Next, live stream classes or live stream education and entertainment. So this was during the peak of the coronavirus. This was a club in Shanghai, and they live streamed their DJ, and they made about 700,000 RMB from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. called cloud clubbing. So the users would log in and live stream and put comments, and they can give the gift, virtual gifts to the DJ. And here's IPTV Classroom, so live stream classes from grades 1 to 12 with 1,000 teachers. So on your TV as well as through your computer or through your phone. And the impact of this is that a lot of kids, I think, in rural areas that traditionally don't have access to the best education now have access to the best teachers. And this is where I put early adopters. So this is, if you can see the video, the village police is speaking through the drone. It's convincing the grandma to go home and put on a mask because she wasn't listening to her family members. So cases like this is because the village can be very spread out. The police, for example, also doesn't want to go out during the coronavirus, but he can use this technology as telepresence to go and monitor different people in the village. Last, I think innovators or kind of early stages is telemedicine. So you can see on the left side, this is Ping An Good Doctor, a vending machine on the left side with medication. And then on the right side is a booth with a person sitting inside. So inside the booth, you can kind of see on the bottom left, this is a very similar setup. You can see the doctor on the screen, and then the doctor can talk to you. This setup for Weak Doctor is actually in a pharmacy, but it's a very similar setup in the vending machine, and you can just get your prescription and then pick up your medication. So to support this, I think also will be a lot of wearables to monitor your biometrics, and then also POCTs, so point of care testing, will also pick up. So to close, these are just some examples of how Intralink has helped different companies to partner with Chinese companies. So you can see on the top is the Chinese company NEO, HiSilicon, Ulema, for example. And these are some Japanese examples, Huawei, Tencent. And the bottom are the companies that we've worked with to help them negotiate a deal. It could be a POC, a joint development deal, licensing, investment, or M&A. And we have experiences in all of these. So last, to summarize, China's one-child policy, large population, single-party system, and a period of isolation gave rise to quite unique technology. Remote technology adoption was accelerated because of coronavirus, because it removed a lot of the regulation and education barriers. And I think we're seeing this globally. Market correction increased the deal volume, but decreased the deal value of M&A. And investments. So this is a good time to look if you're looking for partnerships or deals. And specialization of technology is different according to whichever city that you're looking at. So to close, I think Chinese technology right now is quite interesting, and we invite you to take a look with us. And that's it from me.
Thank you for that, Emma and Greg. It was a really fascinating insight and discussion of open innovation in China. So we've got an opportunity now for roughly 15 minutes for some questions. So if anyone has any questions, please do put them into the to the question box, which is normally floating around the bottom of your screens. As those questions come in, I might get started with one or two of my own. And Greg or Emma, feel free to pick who answers these ones. But one of the questions I have is, so as Greg, as you mentioned, kind of Japanese corporates are very strong in terms of how they've used open innovation. You know, what are we seeing from Chinese corporates, and are there any Chinese companies who are using open innovation well?
Thank you, Chris. Yes, well, I'll sort of half answer that and then perhaps hand over to Emma. Our focus to date has been on Japan, and I think Japan is a smaller place than China, and I think the innovation, the domestic innovation scene, the ecosystem is smaller and frankly, I would say weaker than the Chinese one, and therefore there has been a real need on the part of Japanese corporates to take their open innovation programs global. And we as an organization have benefited from that because we're in a position to help them globalize their open innovation programs. In the case of China, there's an awful lot to go after in China itself. Emma has just explained that. And I think there's an awful lot going on in terms of sort of incubators and accelerators domestically, corporates sponsoring local entrepreneurs and startups. In terms of Chinese companies going global, I think it's a little early. Of course, they're very active when it comes to M&A and to a lesser extent to making strategic investments in startups. But I think open innovation, where really the objective is to collaborate, perhaps leading to POC and JD, still quite early. Emma, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think pure Chinese corporates, I haven't seen a lot of open innovation as we defined it earlier. That sort of activity. I have seen a lot of international companies that have open innovation programs inside China.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, it's fair to say that innovation or that the state plays an outsized role in China. You know, from an innovation perspective, I'm thinking of like Made in China 2025, the 1,000 Talents program, 5-year plans, things like that. You know, what role do you think the Chinese government will have in either encouraging or, I mean, even potentially discouraging open innovation as a model within China?
Emma, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think as you touched on, so the government plays a huge role. A lot of the business owners here say, just follow the government and you'll make money. So whatever policy comes out, a lot of people rush to follow it and tap into that. In terms of, for example, Made in China 2025, for example, automation in industrial robots, for example, there was a huge push. A lot of companies invested in that, but I think we found that through our project work, a lot of the customers actually don't really know why they're investing in it. They know that there's subsidies, so they apply for it. But at the end of the day, it usually just creates a bubble, and then the industry would consolidate. So I think open innovation would be a different approach where different companies can collaborate with each other, I think more, so that it doesn't kind of cause this big, huge bubble and then it bursting and then companies closing down or going bankrupt. So I think that we hope to see more of it, but right now, as I mentioned, Chinese corporates themselves have not tapped into this yet.
So I guess what you're
Sorry, Chris.
I guess what you're saying is that actually open innovation could be a model for Chinese corporates who are looking to kind of innovate outside the kind of that state directed model. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Greg, you were saying?
Yes, I think one way for UK startups to benefit through open innovation, or one way to collaborate with Chinese corporates through open innovation is to be in China. Now, I know that's not always easy, but if they can establish a physical presence in China, they then become, in a sense, from the Chinese corporate's perspective, domestic, and therefore opportunities to collaborate there will be opportunities to collaborate. So that would be, I think, very difficult for Chinese companies, corporates at the moment to collaborate through open innovation programs with startups that are based overseas.
Okay. So we've got a question from the audience from Guy Francis. So Guy writes, he worked in Beijing for 5 years, bringing German products to the Chinese market, and now works as a solicitor in London at a firm called Jolson, with a large number of startups. One of the biggest issues European businesses and startups have in relation to China is that their IP will be stolen or copied by either third party or counterparties that they're looking to work with. How do you guys manage the IP risk in China?
Emma, why don't you go first, and then I will.
Yeah, that's a good question. We get asked that quite a lot. I think overall, the environment here is definitely, they're trying to be more conscious of this in terms of setting up the proper laws and managing this. But in the business community, I think it doesn't always exactly follow the law. There's maybe a little bit of a lag in how people choose their actions. So I think the best way that people have countered this is to you just have to keep innovating. Unfortunately, you can't just sit on one golden egg and then hope that nobody will steal it. Usually you just have to keep either, for example, doing more marketing, you innovate on your branding, or the technology itself. You have to keep coming up with new IP that makes your technology more attractive for your customers. And we see this across different industries.
Okay. So I would just add to that. Thank you, Emma. I think what is absolutely critical is that you have an IP protection strategy that covers all the bases. All right. So by that I mean clearly legal. You need to have the right legal agreements in place. Emma's point about always keeping ahead of the technology curve and not simply assuming that you can conquer China, if you like, through using your earlier generation technology, but also using technical means to protect your IP, taking practical steps to protect your IP, your actual strategy in China itself. So perhaps working with a partner and ensuring that they have a vested interest in protecting your IP. I think there are lots of strands to an IP protection strategy, and it's absolutely critical that you have that in place before you go charging in.
Yep. Yeah. It reminds me of talking to a UK company about, exactly entering the market. And I think their strategy was, for example, to, if they had 4 generations of product, they were only going to release generations 1 and 2 into the Chinese market as kind of an IP protection strategy. So I guess things like that potentially.
Yes.
Okay. So I think, looking at some of the big challenges that China has moving forward, for example, I'm thinking healthcare for an aging population of 1.3 billion citizens, as Emma kind of outlined. What are some of the key areas and sectors that you think open innovation in particular is going to be applied to? Maybe, kind of picking up on that point that open innovation may be more applied to sectors that are outside government focus areas? I mean, I'm just wondering if there are any particular areas where you think that this could be relevant.
Emma, do you want to go first again, just to the areas that you feel are really hot in China?
Sure. I would say, so in terms of the aging population, I would say a lot of the burden actually falls on the state, falls on the government. So they feel responsible to take care of the elderly. Through our projects, we have seen a lot of local companies that have close ties or are state-owned, trying more innovative solutions. So they're a lot more open. Typically, a lot of the larger firms or a lot of the state-owned firms are in the past known to be kind of slow moving, but we found that they are a lot more willing to try new things around elderly care. So as we mentioned before, whatever policy comes out from the government, a lot of people rush to follow it. So elderly care is one focus area I think is very top of mind for technology firms, but also for state-owned enterprises. In terms of open innovation, Greg, do you want to take that?
Yes, yeah. Again, I'll talk. I mean, our experience is really, again, looking at it from a Japanese perspective. But I think what's interesting about what the Japanese have done, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see the same in China, is not only is it happening outside of, in many instances, government support, but even outside of the traditional way that the corporate does business. So often, if you look at Japanese corporates, they'll set up dedicated open innovation groups and give them free rein to go in their own direction. There will be a broad corporate strategy, of course. So the idea is, can they bring in new ideas, new business models, new ways of doing things that perhaps they wouldn't think of themselves internally or through their own R&D efforts. And that really is, that is in order to try to disrupt the disruptors, if you like. So I think that creates opportunities for UK startups to work with Chinese corporates. And I think Chinese corporates are beginning to do that. But again, I just think right now they're not doing a lot outside of China, and therefore really you need to be in China to benefit.
Yeah. So I've actually just had another question submitted, which is probably the last one, given just watching the clock. But Mark is interested in kind of hearing your views on kind of tech nationalization, trade wars, and how that is having an impact on open innovation. And the example he cites is kind of Huawei's experience, right? And some of the recent changes from a policy perspective, both in the US and here in the UK. Do you think that could slow down open innovation in Chinese companies?
I don't think it's just a case of slowing down open innovation. I mean, I think the answer could be yes, okay, but I do have some direct experience of that, which is working with London-based VCs that we're looking to collaborate with, or in some instances secure investment from the likes of Huawei and frankly others, and have not gone ahead with that for political reasons. And that all happened in the past few months. So I have had some direct experience of that. So, let's hope that it doesn't turn into a long-term trend, but I'm afraid that is a possibility. I don't know whether, Emma, you've, from a Chinese, looking at it from China, whether you perhaps have a different perspective.
Yeah, I guess to add to that, I would say I would agree overall, but there might be, I think, a shift in directions. For example, a lot of tech companies might now shy away from American companies, but as Greg mentioned, there would be a lot more opportunities for European, British technology. And for example, they're doing a lot more in Southeast Asia as well. So I think business-wise, they understand that if they need to grow, they need to keep proceeding with innovation, but it just might not be with the US as much. So I think overall there's a slowdown because people are more cautious, but I don't think the business side, they would slow down innovation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think anecdotally we hear kind of similar stories in terms of that less focus on the US and kind of the UK actually kind of stepping in certain situations, just because Chinese companies don't want to, for political reasons, necessarily work with a US company, but UK company is then able to fill that gap. Unfortunately, we're actually out of time for today. But I'd like to thank Greg and Emma for your insights and contribution. As a follow-up, we'll also be sharing the PowerPoint presentation and making a audio recording available of this, and we'll also share contact details for Greg and Emma, so that if anyone wants to kind of continue these discussions in person, then that can take place. Just looking forward, we've got a number of webinars coming up, as you can see on your screen, and you can follow us on our WeChat accounts. But once again, I'd like to thank Greg and Emma, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Bye.